If you would like to work directly with Dr. Kole to maximize your sleep quality with a comprehensive sleep coaching program, or if you're concerned that you have sleep apnea, or simply just want a second opinion consultation, she's now available to see patients in New Jersey, New York, California, and Georgia, with more states coming soon. Please visit oak.care/sleep for a complete list of telemedicine services with transparent pricing. You deserve rapid access to quality sleep care with a physician you can trust to have your back every step of the way on your journey to better sleep.
Hi, I'm Dr. Alison Kole, sleep medicine specialist and bona fide chronic insomniac. Welcome to the Sleep is My Waking Passion podcast. Remember, knowledge is empowerment, and if applied correctly, it can help you biohack your way to a better night of sleep, just like I did. If this resonates with you, please follow me on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Hello, and welcome to part 2 of the shift work episodes. I'm your host, Dr. Alison Kole. Again, I'm joined with me by beautiful Joselyne John, who happens to also be not only a registered nurse, but a model and an entrepreneur and an author. This chick is amazing. So today, we, in our previous episode, talked all about why we should care about shift work, what you need to be thinking of if you're a shift worker. And today, we're going to focus on what the heck you can do to make your existence as a shift worker a little bit less onerous. So without further ado, Joselyne, welcome again. So it was very interesting because your book really focuses not only on surviving your shift work, and really helpful ways that you found you were able to sort of manage what you were doing for a profession as a nurse and working the night shift. But while we were prepping for this, there was a 2023 guideline that came out, which was totally wild. It's all about how to have a more healthy shift work population and what their guidance is. So this guidance, what was crazy is I saw this and I was like, is this a sign from the universe that we need to bring this up? Heck yes. But then I was paralleling it with all the information in your book. And I'm like, here's a person who basically was synthesizing all this material and the experts agree. So the guidelines were based on 55 experts getting together. They were all walks of life. They weren't all physicians. Some of them were psychologists, PhDs, researchers. It was a whole slew of different folks giving their opinions on, based on the data, what we should recommend for shift workers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by kind of reading off some of the guidelines. There are, hint, hint, like 18 of these. So we're not going to go through all of them in like torturous detail. But there are some points that we're definitely going to highlight, especially since you have some particularly useful, helpful tips in that certain thing. So without further ado, Guideline 1, prioritize your sleep. So, girlfriend, we've been talking all about this in episode 1. Why don't you take us away here?
Prioritizing sleep is really a mindset. And I talk about mindset in my book. I talk about, there's a specific chapter here, mindset and sleep. And I believe that for every action you take, there's a belief and a value behind it. We are value driven. And I know, we have people like Brene Brown who always remind us we're emotional beings. Everything we do is really driven by our beliefs and our values, whether or not we acknowledge it. So I think part of prioritizing sleep is really just extending that intention to also ask ourselves, when you're not prioritizing sleep, what's coming up for you? What beliefs and values can we adjust so that you can truly prioritize your sleep? Because it's challenging. You're already working night shift, so prioritizing sleep is going to require that intention and that mindset shift. And research shows that adults, we need 7 to 9 hours. So that calls for aiming for that 7 to 9 hours in 24 hours. And some people are listening to us thinking, where do you think I'm going to find the time for that? But it really starts with your intention and actually making sleep one of your values. Like sleep is one of my values, sleep and rejuvenation. And so when you have a value, then you look for ways to practice that value. In what ways can I practice my value today? So when you make that decision, then it's going to be much easier for you to decide to actually take that nap or practice the other strategies that we're going to give you, because you already have the mindset ready.
I love that. And actually, that's guideline number 2, is just aiming for 7 to 9 hours in a 24-hour period. And for shift workers, the bottom line is this is we always talk about, hey, if you can get a consecutive 7 to 9 hours, great. But this is where there's a lot of latitude, because if it's going to work best for you to break that up, and maybe you need to have a couple of naps and you sort of truncate your time for sleep, that may be what your body tends to do. And if you lean into that, you may end up getting, the equivalent of the 7 to 9 hours, and maybe not just the 4 hours like Joselyne, you experience. And I certainly have been there. I think my best night of sleep sometimes when I was, up and during a time when normally I'm sleeping was maybe 5 hours. It didn't matter what I did. But, if you're a napper, which I find a lot of difficulty with napping, which was one of the reasons that I had such difficulty being able to adapt, this could work to your benefit. So clustering your naps could be a good idea. The other thing too is doing your best. This is guideline number 3, to develop a sleep schedule. So it may depend on what shift you're working. So you may want to work on developing a routine that might work for you if you're in a morning shift or an afternoon shift or a night shift. And for certain jobs, that may change, right? You experienced, okay, I was working days, I was working nights. A lot of police officers I know may have a morning, afternoon, evening kind of shift in their schedule over time. So trying to create an opportunity where you can maximize your sleep as best you can is recommended. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that it's really important to be honest with ourselves and really tap into that thriving mindset, because I always go back to mindset. Because when you're creating a schedule, you essentially are weighing all the things that you have to do that are in front of you. So then it's a matter of prioritizing, because there's always going to be things to be done, your friends, your family, these events, because you just finished a night shift, but other people are living their day-to-day life. Imagine coming off your shift on a Sunday or Saturday. That's where most parties happen, most things happen. So it really requires that really deep self-love to just be honest with yourself at the end of the day. And I think I want to bring up this issue of boundary. I have a chapter in my book called Boundary and Sleep. You might want to bring your boundaries up, because how are you going to create a schedule if your boundaries are still shaky and people can easily... So the people-pleasing part of you has to die. The people-pleasing...
Regardless of shift work, that should be happening. Wink, wink. It's amazing what saying no can do for your quality of life. Seriously.
Indeed.
As trying to be reformed people pleaser, I can attest to that. And
so that's going to help a lot.
So guideline number 4 is developing a bedtime routine. And this applies if you have trouble sleeping, actually applies to everyone. Everyone should have a bedtime routine. It's just that some of us may get away with it because we sleep so well that we can kind of cheat on our bedtime routine. But having a bedtime routine that actually gets you in the zone for sleep is super huge. So, not gaming and social media-ing right before bed, all the stuff that we say light will and prevent you from being able to get to sleep as quickly, for sure. Trying to not exercise right before bed would be another kind of good bedtime routine. Some people, just to get their mindset right, they may, try to do a bit of meditation or listening to music to help relax, reading a book. Some people take baths or take a hot shower to help kind of get them setting the mood. Do you have any other tips for folks on shift work that you would suggest as part of a good bedtime routine, especially if they're overnight and trying to sleep during the day?
Yes, indeed. So bedtime routine, I like to break it down: mind, body, and environment. So just think about it. every day is different. We're evolving human beings, some shifts are calmer than others. So be honest with yourself. What does my mind need right now? Knowing that we need to shift from that go. We have, again, that system that's helping you go through your shift is the sympathetic nervous system. Now, to rest and digest and rejuvenate, you're going to need the parasympathetic nervous system. So what can you do to transition your mind? Essentially, it starts with diagnosing yourself. What is my mind doing? Are you really calm and happy, or do you find your thoughts racing? I used to come back from work and I'll be thinking about the entire shift, going through it from the beginning to an end. Oh my God, did I empty the catheter? How do you transition then? It's really all about bringing your mind to that calm state, changing your brain frequency. How do you do that? In my book, I have a very, very, very easy tool, and I call it the Zen flow, but essentially it's this tool that's helping you to end your stress cycles. Because most people who are listening to us understand the impact of stress on our system. And we've been gifted with this stress response. It's a response that helps us respond to the stresses. So throughout the shift, there's so many different stresses, maybe someone shouted or you had to respond to an emergency. Your stress response is being activated. So what needs to happen for the body to shift from that sympathetic nervous system to parasympathetic nervous system? The stress response has to be concluded. So we have these mini stress responses. So that's why I call it ending the stress cycle. The stress response is a cycle. So the cycle ends, and then the body will then transition to the parasympathetic nervous system. The easiest way to explain it is, you have a lion in front of you, you either fight it or you run away from it or you pretend like you're dead. So either way, at the end, your body will feel safer if the lion has been defeated. Now you're safe, so the body knows, we're safe, back to parasympathetic nervous system. So in the same way, you investigate in your mind, what was my day like? How can I shift? And all the things that Dr. Alison said, those are the activities that help you shift. I just wanted to give them a little bit of a picture of what's happening. So you're using the meditation, the journaling, and it all depends on what people need. But, just letting go and ending those stress cycles.
Letting go and surrendering to sleep. I wrote a book where that was what they said, surrender to sleep. And I just love that statement. And I would encourage you to hold on to it. And I love your broad perspective because it meshes so well with the practical. You actually, I think, probably have quite a bit to say on this next guideline number 5, which is plan your transition to days off. So do you have any recommendations for planning that off? One strategy that's been suggested is if that, you're coming off of night shifts, instead of going through the whole, like sleeping for a chunk of time, maybe just taking a nap and then staying up so that you can transition to falling asleep at night. That's one of the things that's been suggested. Any thoughts on that?
So this is actually very important, and I love this guideline because it ties back to the first one that we talked about. We talked about prioritizing your sleep. The main reason why you're prioritizing your sleep, and Dr. Alison was saying, hey, it's okay if you can get the consecutive 7 to 9 hours, but you're just getting it in whenever you can. What you're doing then, you are really tuning that circadian rhythm so that by the time you are able to actually sleep at night again, your circadian rhythm is being tuned, and now you are basically being intentional and nurturing your circadian rhythm. So when you are planning to get to your days off, I highly recommend when you come off your shift to take a shorter nap. Like, don't nap for too long, because one of the things, like we said earlier in the last episode, in part 1, we talked about the main reasons why we sleep. Is one of them is that sleep pressure. So the longer you stay up, the more the body is going to want to sleep. So the sleep pressure. So if you come off your night shift block, you know you're going to have days off, then don't nap for too long for that day, because you're wanting to finally have that nighttime sleep. So you sleep a short, you're going to have a short nap, so that the rest of the day is for you to continuously develop sleep pressure. In other words, you only have sleep pressure because you have sleep debt, you are in so much debt, but you are also creating, along with that, you are creating a little bit of sleep restriction, so that you're going to have even more pressure to sleep later on. So now what you can do during that time, you can fill it with all these sleep promoting activities, such as going outside for sunlight exposure. So sunlight exposure is really important for you to uplift your mood, get the serotonin, and serotonin helps in the conversion of, it's going to convert into the melatonin, which is going to help you initiate the sleep. So one of the things that night shift is doing is suppressing the melatonin, because you have to suppress melatonin to stay awake. So now you're retraining your body to create that melatonin naturally, you know? So that's what I used to do. Calm nap. You are only taking a short nap to rejuvenate, to boost your focus and attention to be able to go through the day without burning up all the sleep pressure, and just enjoy that day, you know, do all the amazing things you can do. But another thing I wanted to recommend, along with transition in general, not just when transitioning to days off block, even when you are coming off your night shift, is to really be mindful of that light exposure. And this has been said a lot. Everywhere you read, they tell you light influences your sleep. But I think we need to practice more, because we hear it so often that we ignore it. But one of the things that can help would be literally just wearing your sunglasses on your way home, and reducing the light on your devices, you know, and when you get home, just blocking all the light from outside. You can use your eye mask, just simple things like that, and to keep it calm, because darkness is not only helping you produce melatonin, but it's also helping calm the brain, and having that tranquility. Yeah.
So you actually touch base on so many good points that are sort of individualized in the guidelines, but guidelines 6 and 7 are essentially using napping as a helpful tool. And then number 7 is consider sleep inertia. So this is really important, and it ties into the napping. Essentially a power nap, like a 20-minute nap, it's enough to have you feel rejuvenated, but it doesn't steal from your entire, from your sleep debt that much. One sleep cycle is roughly about an hour and a half or so. And so in that one sleep cycle, we'll have light sleep, stage 2, we have deep delta wave sleep, and then we have rapid eye movement sleep. The 20-minute power nap just lets you get some rest and get some sleep, but you're trying to stay out of that deep sleep. And you're also trying to stay away from actually losing an entire sleep cycle at the end of the day when you're trying to sleep. So one of the things that can happen, especially if you're waking up and you're in stage 3 sleep, is, there's no way anybody listening to this probably hasn't experienced that with a slightly too long nap. You wake up feeling groggy, like you're out of it. It takes you a while to really feel like you can wake up. And that's one of the concerns, is that if you sleep too long, you're going to wake up in that stage 3-ish groggy sleep, and you're really not going to function as alertly. So it's important, as you're thinking of napping before a shift, which is often recommended, especially if you're going into a night shift, to be mindful of how long you are sleeping, for sure. Guideline number 8, which ties into just creating that optimal bedtime routine, is creating a comfortable sleep environment. So, that can look slightly different for certain people, but I would encourage these, to emphasize some of the universal things you described. You want to have your bedroom dark. Invest in room darkening shades. They seriously do not have to cost a lot of money. I mean, you can find them on sale at Marshall's, Amazon usually has good deals and stuff like that. Room darkening shades that we have, we bought at like Home Depot, so we didn't get fancy. They have really expensive shades. You can go to a place that makes shades for you, and they would be really tailored to your windows. Ours are just sort of like the best we could do from Home Depot because that's what was most affordable. But it doesn't have to break the bank to create that environment. If it's not in your budget to go out and like shop for curtains, get some dark. You can just hang some dark sheets if that's what you have. It's whatever will work to keep the room dark. So
I wanted to interrupt and empower people who feel like, oh, I don't want to buy anything. I used to use blankets. I would take all my bed sheets and blankets and I would just put them up until my landlord one day, I told him, is it possible to get me? Yeah, he just fixed it for me. But until then, it was working. So anything, as long as you can keep it dark.
Yes. Also, the temperature can be important. Now, some people really are sort of I've heard that roughly a 68 degree temperature bedroom seems to be quote ideal, but I do think it kind of varies from person to person. I tend to really prefer 71 degrees. That's optimal. My husband would rather it be 65. That is our compromise is at 71. So maybe it's not really a compromise, but I'm the one with trouble sleeping, so it should be me. But in all seriousness, they also have a lot of things that help to mimic what you need, right? So at different stages in your life, you may need certain things. Certainly if you're a postmenopausal woman, you're having hot flashes, you're kind of going through those vasomotor symptoms, which you can hear all about on the Sleep and Perimenopause podcast that I did last season with Dr. Val. The bottom line is they actually have so much cool tech out there that it might be worth looking into if that's something that you can afford or is of interest. They have sheets now that literally can be cooled. So you can have one side of the bed be cooler than another side. You can kind of control the temperature. So if you have a bed partner, you can make sure you're not chilling them out if you really like it cold. There's so many sort of neat tips for you to do. You mentioned the sleep mask, which I love. My daughter Lily mentioned that on episode 1 of season 2. I don't like the feeling of wearing earplugs, but they do now make these tiny little earbuds that may either have white noise or you can listen to nature sounds. Like you could actually have something in the background to kind of drown out either your breathing or whatever's going on in the environment around you. Lawnmowers, kids screaming. That was one of the hardest things for me. I had toddlers during COVID and I'd come home and they'd be like, they're like going nuts because there's no pre-K, everything's shut down. And I was like, oh, great. Now I'm really not going to sleep. Number 9, use your bed for sleep and intimacy only. So I love this statement. I don't know if you talk to your sleep clients about this, but I say the bed is for sleep and for nookie, and that is it. So if you ain't getting any nookie, get the heck out of bed if you're not sleeping. And this touches base on guideline number 10, which is you really covered, which is consider light exposure, right? So you mentioned it. If you need to keep yourself going, you've had your little power nap, but now you're going to flip-flop your shift and you want to keep going, right? Just like you said, get light, go outside. It's great to kind of stimulate you. And then also just realigning your circadian rhythm as well as when you need to wake up. One of the ways to get your body adjusted is to seek out ideally sunlight. If you're in Canada on some days, I'm sure you probably don't get that much sunlight, but the idea is having some bright light exposure, and they even make lamps and things now that can do that. And I love what you said about the sunglasses. That's one of those things you can have, I call them the Linda Hamilton glasses. Do you remember the Terminator where she had these, like one of the early Terminators where she had these cool glasses that had the sides. Yeah. So it was just her eyes and the goggle sides. Those are like hip. Or you can go a little old school, like you've just had eye surgery and now you're wearing those big goggles that older folks sometimes wear. Whatever, works for you, but something ideally, I remember we talked about this in Sleep Fellowship, ideally that will even protect your eyes from even getting the side light. So you almost feel like you're leaving whatever job you have or leaving the hospital and it's still dark outside so that you can come home and still have it be dark. So it sort of tricks your brain as opposed to going, okay, now I'm driving home in the sunlight, which I know will stimulate me to stay up longer. And now I'm trying to get to bed after my night shift. Mm-hmm. So I loved that advice. I think you had some interesting thoughts on caffeine. And this is actually a guideline for some folks with, shift work, is that you can use caffeine. I want to hear your opinion on it, just in terms of what the guidelines suggest. And it makes a lot of sense to me, especially if you're a night shift and you kind of are struggling to get on. You can use caffeine, but you just need to be, what they talk about is smaller bits stretched out over time. We're not talking about 4, venti double espresso shot, drinks from Starbucks throughout the entire shift. But rather, if you want to front load it a bit, you could do that to help you get through the shift. But just keep in mind that caffeine lasts a long time. But Joselyne, you had a great section in your book, so I wanted to give you some chance to speak about that.
Yeah, so caffeine is metabolized differently across different populations. So it's really important to do that inventory to see how is your relationship with caffeine, first of all, because the longer people have taken caffeine, the more they have developed tolerance to caffeine. Now they might actually need more for them to actually feel the kick. So it starts by knowing where people are. And also another thing is, did you know that you can renew your relationship with caffeine in 72 hours? It's going to take 72 hours for all the caffeine you took to get out of your system. So it's going to depend on where you are. If I'm a virgin to caffeine and I might just need a little bit. So self-inventory first. But according to how caffeine works, because caffeine essentially is working by messing with your sleep pressure, because it's similar in the chemical structure as this chemical called adenosine. So adenosine is the chemical that is going to develop as we use up our body and develop pressure to sleep. Adenosine will be one way to measure our pressure to sleep. So what happens is caffeine actually mimics the receptors of the adenosine. So caffeine is going to come and attach itself to adenosine structure or adenosine receptor. And then your brain will be convinced that you are alert now and everything is fine. So actually, there is a recent research, so many research have talked about this, but I read recently, caffeine is not necessarily reducing your tiredness. It's just working on the brain to give you that attention and focus, but it won't last. It will only last as long as the caffeine is going to last. It's not a long-term attention, but you will just feel that disconnection between you're oh, I'm alert, but my muscles are tired and I'm really exhausted. So it's I call it caffeine deception in the book, just to make a point, but we know that caffeine is something that we have been consuming since we're young. So the best is not to avoid it, but the best is to consume it strategically. So for night shift, it's really important when you think about all the things we've talked about regarding circadian rhythm and how it works in part 1 and today. So if you're beginning your night shift, you need to stay alert, right? So you're using caffeine to stay alert. But the longer you do your night shift, the more you're going towards the rejuvenation that you deserve. So what you do is taking the caffeine earlier in your shift. Say you set your shift at 7 p.m. and you're gonna get off at 5 a.m. So take it earlier in the shift. And depending on your tolerance and where you are, make a decision of the right dose and go ahead for it. But I read research that showed 20 grams of caffeine was just as effective as a 15 minutes walk. So just keep in mind, sometimes taking too much might not necessarily mean. So just see how it makes you feel. Really, it's really hard to give the right dose because people are different. And then throughout the night, because there will be time where the caffeine is going to be declining, and now the receptors will be reuniting back to adenosine, reminding you how truly tired you are and unfocused. You might be maybe experiencing sleep inertia at this time, where you're just oh, groggy, I don't know what's going on. At that time, I highly recommend using a 15 to 20 minutes nap to keep up the alertness or use light exposure. Did you know, I think you know this, and most people are using this. I have been using it, especially in winter, like these vitamin D light. I mean, I'm not promoting any company at all, but I have found them very helpful. They're so bright, like you put it in front of you, it just feels like sunshine. So, use naps and light exposure to maintain alertness throughout the shift. And then so that by the time you go home to rest, you are not under the influence of caffeine, because caffeine is actually going to affect your sleep. So that's what I would recommend. That's what I have done, where you just front load, and then use naps and light exposure for the rest of the journey.
Yes. Awesome. So a couple of quick ones. Try to abstain from nicotine. So nicotine can kind of be a depressant, but it also can be a stimulant. That goes without saying, right? Cigarettes contain nicotine, very addicting. We know it's not very good for you. Some people are vaping nowadays. Just beware of what's in them, because, vaping can be associated with acute lung injury and some other reports of obliterative bronchiolitis I've read about. So you just want to be mindful of that. Alcohol intake is something that, especially if you're in healthcare, I'm 100% guilty of using it as a stress reliever. Like, oh my God, all right, I'm done with my crazy shift. Maybe if I have a glass of wine, that'll shift me into a lower gear. But really, at the end of the day, there's a lot of toxicity associated with alcohol. I think the best, very dense, but very good synopsis of it is on the Huberman Lab podcast. He did a really great episode where he talked all about the toxicities associated with alcohol in a way that really sort of was very eye-opening to me. And it's one of those things where, I have certainly cut back considerably. And now it's like, if it's a weekend or something and I'm just relaxing with my husband, I'm not a person who tries to overly indulge. So that's something I've been very, very mindful of. I can't say I'm on the 100% sober train, because that's not true, but I certainly am not binge drinking or anything. But, certainly when I was on holiday, for example, it was kind of nice to kick back and, have a glass of wine, maybe two, but nothing nuts, It will affect your sleep. It tends to, you kind of pass out because you're intoxicated, and then you start to metabolize that alcohol, and then it essentially fragments your sleep for the rest of the night. So it's really, it also, if you have a tendency to have some snoring and some upper airway resistance, it can exacerbate that, because it does relax your muscles as well. Guideline number 14 is to be mindful of medication. You have a whole section in your book where you talk a bit about various medications. You just need to be, this actually applies to anyone, even if you're not on shift work. Some medications may have a negative impact on your ability to sleep. Ironically enough, beta blockers, which usually help to regulate our heart rate, can sometimes be associated with insomnia. That's a biggie. And just other things like some of the antidepressants may be more stimulating versus not, and that may impact your sleep. And in this, I do want to just segue a little bit just from the medical perspective and mention some things that you could consider if you're really struggling that are indicated. Okay. So very small trials, but there has been a meta-analysis looking at small trials and looking at melatonin 1 to 3 milligrams. And basically what they found was that it improved total sleep time. So people did tend to sleep a little bit longer if they took melatonin. Again, not very robust data, but it's something that could be considered. You just want to go with a supplement that, maybe has been looked at by, the United States Pharmacopoeia, or has some sort of backing to it, or has been highly regarded as having the contents that it promises to have. Because remember, none of that stuff is FDA regulated. There have been instances where I've prescribed things like sedative hypnotics, Ambien, Lunesta, that type of thing to help with sleep. And wholeheartedly, I needed to start taking a sleep aid to get through that period of time when I had to do night shifts. So I actually did take something just because I tried everything and it was not working. But that being said, is that really where we want to go? Do you really want to take those medications forever? So I'm just telling you what's approved and what you could use if you wanted to, and what technically would be clinically indicated. But again, we're teaching you all the tips to see if we can avoid needing to do that. Lastly, I just wanted to interject that there are a couple of stimulants that are out there if you're really feeling like you need to be alert and you're doing that shift and you just have incredible sleep inertia, you just really feel groggy and don't feel like you can really function at work very well. Those stimulants have been around for a long time. One is modafinil, the other is R-modafinil, which is basically, if you remember from chemistry, we have these enantiomers, these drugs that are sort of mirror images of each other. And this is the R enantiomer of modafinil that tends to be, quote, more potent or last a little bit longer. These things exist and they can be prescribed, and you can, consider discussing it with your healthcare professional, but we're not quite sure the entire picture of why these medications work, but they do sort of stimulate our wake centers of our brain, and they can be associated with side effects, right? We can see people who, especially got to be careful in cardiovascular disease. So some people with high blood pressure, that could raise their blood pressure. If you have cardiac arrhythmias, meaning you have irregular heart rhythms, that might be something that you may want to think twice about really committing to taking a medication like that. I do have some patients that use it sort of as needed if they're really in jobs where they have to work a shift, but also have to, like you said, heavy machinery. They really need to be very alert for some of those things. So I always just counsel patients to just be mindful of those things. And what's really interesting about the data is there's a scale that they use, and I'm going to butcher the name. The Karenskaya scale, sleepiness scale, it starts with a K. There is a scale that basically says, okay, if you're at a 1, you're super alert. And if you're at a 9, you feel like you're just going to fall asleep even filling out that questionnaire. And what they found is, looking at that questionnaire with the data of these drugs, is that it improved your sleepiness by 1 point. So I also would throw at you that, yes, it might help, but how much is it really helping, and is it worth the side effects? So I'm going to bring that up. And I wish I could remember the Karolinskaya scale. Oh, I can't remember it. Sorry, guys, I just can't. But you can find information on this, and I certainly have all the journal articles that are going to be written for you there. Now, next, I'm going to punt back to you because I know you have a lot to say about this. And I'm going to do 2 of these, actually 3, because we're almost done with all of our guidelines. Guideline 15, 16, and 17. So consider your food intake, consider your fluid intake, and engage in regular exercise, because you're talking to a marathon runner who is hyper vigilant about what she puts in her body. So you go, girl. You tell us about that.
Yeah, so for exercise is amazing. It's the best thing that has happened to us as human beings because, we can renew ourselves, our mind, body, and spirit just by exercising. So I'm a big fan of exercise, but remember, exercising is actually renewing your mind. It's uplifting your mood while also giving you ability to strengthen yourself. So a lot of people fear exercise, and they often people say, I don't have time. So I always ask, do you feel like your problem is time or motivation? And be honest with yourself, and let's figure out. If it's time, then let's reprioritize. If it's motivation, then let's look within and figure this out. If it's fatigue, we talked about all these things you can do, napping strategically, fighting inertia, and taking your caffeine strategically, sunlight exposure. All these things will actually uplift your energy. So you have everything you need to start exercising. And exercise is defined as just moving. So don't worry that you don't have to do heavy lifting. Nowadays we have heat, high intensity. It's not even how long you're exercising, really. You can exercise for 5 minutes and have such a huge impact. So go and keep moving. And then eating healthy. It's all about just being mindful about the impact of sleep deprivation on your appetite hormones. So when you're craving something, reminding yourself, this is not me. So set up your environment for success, stock your fridge with vegetables, kale, cucumbers, all these amazing things. And then, like we talked about, keep in mind that thriving and healthy mindset, because you could have your environment all stocked up with all these amazing foods and you don't have any unhealthy foods, but then you're gonna Uber eat it. What's the point? So you need to have your mindset ready. And another thing about nutrition is I have actually a chapter on nutrition and sleep. There's so many pathways on how nutrition is affecting sleep and sleep affecting nutrition. So nutrition goes beyond just eating and giving us energy. It's also how it affects our gut environment, and gut health problems now have been contributed to many health problems, inflammation. So just be mindful of what you're eating. And one of the things that I have been doing in my practice is actually recommending like food sensitivity tests, depending on what symptoms people are having. So if you're having a lot of like gut problems, like, bloating, you're eating certain foods and you're seeing symptoms, just check it out. Like, see what's happening, because that could be a sign that your gut, your microbiome is not happy, and there are things to look into. And another thing about nutrition is always eat light and non-spiced foods before bed, because spiced foods will actually increase your body temperature, like we talked about temperature earlier, all the external things you can do. But avoiding spiced food before going to bed will be one way to also calm your temperature down. So this is just in a nutshell. I have more information in my book. It can be hard to give all the tips, but those are like the highlights for nutrition.
I got her book on Amazon, guys. I'm telling you, she did a bang up job. The final guideline this is guideline number 18, is to develop strategies for sleep problems. This kind of goes to everything that we touch base on. Essentially like keeping your room dark, having your routine, don't stay in bed if you can't fall asleep, get up and relocate. And, just setting yourself up for success. But at the end of the day, what I wanted to end with was your message, which is you can not only just survive, you can replace surviving with thriving. So tell us about that, because I think that is probably the most profound thing we're going to talk about today. Yes, I think all the tips are helpful and inspiring, but I want people to leave here really understanding that you got this. You can thrive. So what are your final words for everybody?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can thrive. If I have managed to thrive all the way from refugee camp to a new country, to struggling through nursing school, living by myself in a new country, you were born to thrive, literally, and the best gift you've been given is quality of life, regardless of what you're going through. Maybe right now you can't even see through tomorrow. You're like, I hate this job. I don't know. There's nothing else I can do. I have to work 2 jobs. I have to do this and this. It's happening. That's the reality, but that is not your destination. So always know and see past today. Like today, that is actually the fact. That is what's happening today, but that is not your entire life. The fact is you were born to thrive. And how do you actually shift from surviving to thriving? It starts with the mindset and actually embracing it, that you were actually born to thrive. And then really embracing, seeing that as a gift and starting to look, and in every day asking yourself, in what ways can I thrive? Maybe today your thriving is just being able to go for a 15 minutes walk today, which maybe haven't done in like 3 months. Maybe today thriving is just picking one of these strategies today and using it. It starts with intention and taking small action. Thriving is not like this big outcome, because often, like Dr. Alison was saying, people keep saying, I will be happy when, I will thrive when. No, thriving is not the outcome. Thriving is actually the process. It's
right now, really.
It's right now. Right now, just what can you do to thrive? You want to pick up your bottle and drink some water? You are thriving. Just every time you are doing something to invest back in yourself, you are thriving. And then before you know it, you have all these activities you do to thrive. You have like 3 things you do to thrive every day. You have 4, 5, 6, 7. And truly, then you become a thriver and you join our thriving community. I always say, everybody say, welcome to Sleep Time and welcome to the thriving community. You are part of it now because you can.
Oh my goodness. Girlfriend, you're like a walking infomercial for that book. I love it. No, there's seriously, you have so many great things. What you have managed to accomplish is truly inspiring, and I'm hoping it's going to inspire our listeners as well. If you want to check out Joselyne, you can go to sleepishealth.com. My website is actually finally launched. It's askthesleepmd.com. Check it out. You can sign up for information. You can sign up for the latest podcast episodes there. Just give us our email. If you want to support the podcast in any way, we're going to have a way for you to do that. It's a way to try to keep the podcast self-sustaining. If you're interested in having a sleep consultation with myself, I do practice in the New Jersey, New York, California, and Georgia areas via telemedicine. We offer all sorts of programs, as complex as a full coaching program to as simple as just a one-off visit or some management for your sleep apnea. I feel very comfortable doing all of those things. So please help us help you sleep better. Take advantage of what we have to offer. Thank you, Joselyne. Yeah. I can't even believe what a fabulous, I can believe it because I spoke with you and I was just in awe, but we really got to the meat and potatoes of a lot of stuff, and it was super worth a two-parter for sure, because there's just so much to unpack here. I find you to be a tremendous human, and I am grateful that you wanted to share your journey with us on this podcast. It's pretty awesome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alison. You are so inspiring as well. It's been lovely working with you. And thank you, everyone, for giving us your presence and your attention. And we hope that you've been inspired, and we wish you the best of luck and continue thriving.
Hello to all my fellow sleep biohackers out there. I have a call to action for you. If you are enjoying this podcast, if you feel that you are growing, you're more knowledgeable, you're feeling empowered about your sleep, that is the purpose. So please take the time to like and review the podcast, share it amongst your friends and family. Please follow me. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram or Facebook, I am there as well. My handle on Instagram and TikTok is AskTheSleepMD. And you can also go to my website, askthesleepmd.com, for more information about each of these episodes. We will be sharing with you cited articles that you can actually refer to and read yourself if you like, and lots of juicy tidbits about how to sleep better. Thank you. This podcast would not be possible without the support of Mr. Joey Salvia, who is my producer, and Adrian Paterath, my creative director. Disclaimer. The statements made on this podcast have not been evaluated by the U.S. Food or Drug Administration. They are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. The information provided by this podcast should not be used as individual medical advice. While I am a practicing sleep provider, I am not your sleep provider. You should always consult with your personal healthcare provider for individual recommendations and treatment.